Welcome to the latest episode of 305 Vox Populi here in the town of Miami Lakes. I'm Mayor Manny Sid, and we have a great guest today. We have former Miami-Dade County Mayor Alex Penelas. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mayor. How are you? Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to give a shout out to some of the folks that sponsor this podcast. We're powered by Miami Lakes Auto Mall. Shout out to Fred Senra. They're located at 16600 Northwest 57th Avenue in Miami Lakes. Their phone number is 305 455 3540. We know what's going on with the car industry. It is going wild. It is really. I think 60 Minutes had a whole thing about it the other day where the microchips that go into the cars, there's a shortage. Can't find them anywhere. So it's really fascinating. Also, a shout out to Grisel Gajano. She just finished this amazing mural. She did a great job. Her phone number is 786-353-8608. You can text message her because she is one of a kind. She did a great job. What do you think, Alex, of the mural? It's a local artist.
You don't see this very often in mayoral offices, so so it's nice.
You got that right. Our food sponsor, thanks to Joseph. He brought some Vicky Bakery for our entire team. And our film production team, the Matter Lakes Bears. This is a live classroom. It's actually become an academy. Next year, it'll be a full classroom. I just heard there's 100 kids that already signed up to be part of the Broadcast Academy. So we're very fortunate to see that and that future generation taking those steps forward. So, Alex, I wanted to break the ice with something. Back in the days, Hialeah, 1997 in particular, I was either in 7th or 8th grade at Horeb Christian School, right on 68th and 8th. And I was already playing on the basketball team, so we would have practice every single afternoon. And one thing that always struck out, really hit me, were those jingles that would happen in the elections, La Caravana that would go by. So we would hear it every single day. And I think at that point it was Raul Martinez and Germán Echevarria. En paz descanse. Rest in peace, Germán Echevarria, great man. And I remember that election just because we would, as kids, we were middle school, and we would talk about the election. And that's what's kind of started for me, piquing my interest into what was going on, because everybody, and I really got to give it to the electorate in Hialeah, because this was pre-social media, everybody was in tune with what was going on. You went to any block, almost every house had a yard sign. Everybody was participating. This is something you didn't see before, and the showcase in democracy in those Hialeah elections, to me, was amazing, and something that piqued my interest. I volunteered. The first time was in 2003 in one of the Hialeah elections. I got involved, and that's how, now I'm mayor of the town of Miami Lakes, right? But that's really going back to that 97 election, and me just practicing basketball and hearing those jingles, started asking the questions. Why is this going on? I would see everybody with the bumper stickers, and that piqued my interest. But what's great about having you on is that you were, I think you're a county mayor already, but you were there. You got elected in the 80s in Hialeah, so you were in the peak of that entire movement, which I think is so special to see that exercise in democracy. So kind of give us a behind the scenes glimpse of your time in Hialeah. What started you, your why you got elected, why did you run for public service, and heading into all those city council elections, commission elections, county mayor elections. You kind of just break the ice with that.
Sure. It's interesting you mentioned that, because coincidentally that's exactly what piqued my interest in politics, because I also grew up in Hialeah. So growing up, obviously, as an elementary student in the 60s, middle school, and high school in the 70s, I too found really just the excitement of Hialeah politics was very unique. And you'd see people on street corners with signs. Probably the favorite spot was right next to Gus Machado Ford on
100%.
on 12th and 49th. La Caravana, flatbeds, people dancing with music. It was very active. I think it was a great example of what we don't see very much of today, which is true grassroots politics. People knocking on doors, getting folks out to vote. And that also piqued my interest. I was in college at the time, right down the street here at what was then Biscayne College, now St. Thomas University, and then law school at the University of Miami. And I said, you know what? When I'm done with law school and after I practiced law for years, I think public service is something I want to try. So I was first elected to the city council in 1987. And yes, I knocked on a lot of doors. I stood on a lot of street corners, and I participated in a lot of those caravans because that's how people got to know you.
Yeah, that was an amazing time, and to me, when I volunteered in that 2003 election, I didn't even know the candidates. For me, it was just having that energy, being part of that energy,
Right.
what was going on, and understanding it. But yeah, it was amazing. So when you got elected to the city council, I know the didn't exist, right? Social media didn't exist. All the we have cameras now in the chamber that record everything they move. Talk to us about those first couple of years, because I got elected. I think you were a lot younger than me when I got elected. I got elected here when I was 28. I think 28 years old. I became vice mayor at 29. But to me, it was kind of like a shell shock at first.
Yeah.
You're like, man, I'm up here making these decisions. So how did that?
Well, for me, it was fascinating because while I had a clear agenda on things that I wanted to do regarding good government, ethics, and the like, the issue that was dominant at the time was the Supreme Court's review of a Hialeah ordinance regarding the sacrifice of animals in the name of religious freedom. I don't know if you remember that case.
I do remember that.
It was, and it's still on the books.
It is.
It is still on the books. Pichardo was the El Santero, right? And obviously there were complaints about the animal sacrificing that was taking place on that. Well, I think there's a storage there now right off of Okeechobee, and I think it's I don't know, maybe Second Street or Third Street, and there was an old temple there, and residents started to complain. City passed an ordinance and it was taken all the way to the Supreme Court. So it was a very interesting time as a new lawyer. I had studying constitutional law, how you balance all of those issues. But it was I served on the Hialeah City Council with some of the old names of Hialeah politics. In fact, I took over for Silvio Cardozo,
Wow.
who had been preceded me on the city council. I served, obviously, with Raul Martinez as mayor. Andy Mejides, who recently passed.
Wow.
Great gentleman. Julio Martinez, who later became mayor when there were the whole issues with the indictments and the like. I served with Salvatore D'Angelo.
Wow.
I mean, some names that way back, and obviously I was by far the at the time the youngest member of the Hialeah City Council at the age of 25, and but having had that experience in law school, I came in with a different mindset, and I thought that simple things like if you had a financial interest in a piece of land that was up for rezoning at the city council, that you should either disclose that conflict of interest and recuse yourself from the vote, right? I felt that, like other jurisdictions were doing at the time, that we should require lobbyists to register with the city clerk, which is now,
right?
now it's every day. But you're talking about the late 80s, where a lot of these things were, were unheard of. And it was controversial, but to Mayor Martinez's credit, after having a sit down with him and kind of going through why I felt these things were necessary, and interesting enough, after having opposition even from some in the legal department of the city, which was also unheard of, we got things like that done in Hialeah. But it was a time of incredible growth. I give folks one example which exemplifies how much Hialeah has grown. And obviously Miami Lakes to the north. When I ran for the city council in 1987, and you were trying to lay out your mail budget, right? You're going to send mail to voters. There were maybe 100 voters west of La Palmetto. Listen to what I just said. There was maybe 100 voters west of the Palmetto. Now there are thousands and thousands and thousands. The city started growing to the west, to the point where now it's almost a quarter, if not a third, of the total population of Hialeah. So yeah, different time, different issues, but it was a fascinating experience, for a young person, and it goes to a lot of the students that may be watching us on this podcast, that anything's possible. I mean, if you're a hard worker and you're going to dedicate yourself. And I did it the old-fashioned way. I got an old-fashioned walking list. I knocked on 5,000 doors.
Wow.
No one knew who I was. People know who I am now, but they didn't know who I was in 1987. And the fact that I offered a new, young perspective, having just graduated from law school, I think was attractive to a lot of that working class generation that had left. Think about it. They had, like my parents, your parents, left their professional careers, everything they were educated for. They left that behind, and they came here to do whatever. My mother went to work as a housekeeper at a hotel on Miami Beach. My father went to pick tomatoes down south in the Homestead area. You know, these are two professionals. They did whatever it took. So for a lot of that generation that was just becoming U.S. citizens and voting, they said, wow, you know, this kid has come to the, you know, was born in this country, educated, now is running for office. You know, a lot of people saw, you know, a bright future for their own children. And that's the message I give to young people all the time. Don't let anybody tell you you're not good enough. Don't let anybody judge you because of the neighborhood you grew up in or the color of your skin or whether you're rich or poor. None of that matters. None of that matters. You may have to work a little bit harder. There may be certain obstacles that you're presented with in life. But if you set yourself to certain goals, this is a great community. And we all have those stories, right, of how our families came from nothing and were able to help launch us into what we do now.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think you hit it on the head. It's all possible. You're an example of that. I'm an example of that, and we have to inspire that future generation. So I appreciate you sharing that. What's interesting is, and I think a lot of folks, I never heard about it before. So now the lobbyist disclosure, recusing yourself when you had it. I mean, that is fascinating to know that you're the one that put that in place and pushed for that, and seeing where it's come today, where I literally have to disclose and even recuse myself when I'm going to appoint somebody who is my business partner, something in a committee that doesn't even, you know what I mean? That we've gotten to that point today, which is phenomenal. We want more.
But it was a different place. So fast forward a few years later to the county commission. I'll give you another couple of interesting tidbits of the environment that I came up in. For example, one of the first things that I was told when I arrived at the county commission, here I am in 1990, youngest ever county commissioner. I was 28 at the time, had to run countywide. There were no districts as there are now. It was a countywide election. One of the first things I was told by the county attorneys was, listen to this, that I was not allowed to communicate with my constituency in Spanish. We had an anti-bilingual ordinance. The county had an anti-bilingual ordinance. So you couldn't use taxpayer resources. You couldn't use a stamp. You couldn't use the phone. You couldn't use letterhead to communicate. The only exception was health and safety, right? A firefighter, police officer, things of that nature. So that was one of the many issues of reform that we set out to change, okay? We fought for single-member districts. Ironically, I probably would not have been elected from a smaller district. But I looked around, and I was the only Hispanic on the Board of County Commissioners. There was only one African-American, Arthur Teal, at the time. And then we set out to change and brought about single-member districts. And now, as you know, the county is a minority-majority board. Issues like equality. You were allowed to discriminate based on sexual orientation back at, and one of the first things that we did in this era of change, right? The late 80s or 90s really was an era of change at the county, was passed the Human Rights Ordinance, which says, listen, you cannot discriminate in housing or jobs just because of someone's sexual orientation. You can't do that. Now it's, now everybody's on that. But in the 90s, to actually speak out and say that we're not going to discriminate based on sexual orientation was a significant problem. So this was a different county. Hialeah was different. Miami Lakes basically didn't exist. I mean, Hialeah. In fact, Miami Lakes became a city, and when I think it was 2000, right? Yep. When I was mayor, I remember, I'll never forget signing the ordinance right on Main Street with Wayne Slayton at the time, who was one of the founders of the incorporation movement and the founding mayor of the town. This was a different place, my friend. So yeah, anything is possible, and you just got to work at it. And obviously, we have different challenges today, but it was a different time.
So understanding all those challenges and seeing your growth from the Hialeah City Council to the County Commission, why make the jump? Why make the move? Say, you know what? It's time for me to run for county mayor. It's time for me to keep implementing all these changes that I did in Hialeah, that I did on the commission, take it to that next level. So what's your why there? What made you, your compelling reason why you made that change?
Well, look, I felt like at that point I had, first of all, I was the author of the executive mayor form of government. And that's another interesting tidbit of history. Right after Hurricane Andrew, when there really was, a lot of people felt a lack of leadership in the county. I mean, South Dade, as you know, was devastated. The famous headline from the Miami Herald when Kate Hale, the then emergency manager of Miami-Dade County, went out and said, "Where's the cavalry?" Okay, because South Dade had been devastated and there was no leadership, and we had a great man as mayor at the time, no doubt about it. Steve Clark was a phenomenal person, but it was a weak mayor form of government. Right, the mayor was basically a commissioner who had a vote on the commission, but presided over the meetings of the town council, similar to the system here in Miami Lakes, and most municipalities have that form of government. It's not unusual. So shortly after Hurricane Andrew, I proposed that we go to a stronger, not the strong version we have now, but a stronger executive mayor form of government where the mayor would not have a vote on the commission but would have veto power and would appoint the county manager. And voters approved that, but not effective until '96. So at that point, I had served on the county commission for 6 years. I felt I had led the charge on a lot of these reforms, including the creation of the Ethics Commission, which today still regulates the conduct of elected officials and candidates, not only at the county but at the municipal level. I felt it was time. Listen, I was at that point. I was still young. I was 34 at the time, but I felt it was either up or out. Right? I mean, I had done my time on the county commission, and I was fortunate enough to be elected. That was '96 as the county's first executive mayor, 34 at the time, but really with an agenda that I wanted to take beyond just the limits of Miami-Dade County. And that's, where I started working on big picture issues like homelessness, transportation, universal pre-kindergarten, which was a statewide effort, because that's really what the platform that you're offered at the county. It's a second largest, the largest municipal or local government in the state of Florida, but second in size only to the state of Florida. And that also was a fascinating experience to have served for 2 full terms as the county mayor with, again, some of the folks who are still there. I mean, some of the folks that now with term limits, many of them will be moving on after the next cycle. But it really was a fascinating experience to serve at a time when, again, a lot of changes were still taking place.
So one of the first meetings I had when I became mayor was I reached out to Alex. I was like, let me sit down with Alex. Let me get some advice. And he gave me some of the you gave me some of the better advice that I had gotten, especially being a young man. I was 33 at the time, and I had I'm sure the same issues. People are like, there's no way that a 33-year-old can. And this is only a city of 33,000, so I can only imagine, countywide. But I remember you telling me, focus on what's in your control, right? As a city, try to shy away from, be an advocate for bigger issues, but just understand that those issues that are out of your control, if you're way ahead of it, there's nothing you can do because it's in other people's control. So that's something that's helped me because I said, you know what, let's focus on the things that matters. And we see that happen. The same thing you did in the counties, bring that perspective. But on the virtual, not the universal pre-K. I know the impact that it's had in South Florida. Talk to us about that.
Sure.
That whole process, because today everybody enjoys that benefit, right? Which is so important. We understand specifically the working class, what they go through, what I go through. We're all part of it, blue collar folks in Miami-Dade County, but specifically the entire process. Was there any pushback? Were there people against it? Who was for it? That if you can give us that tidbit, because I know today everybody, deals with it and enjoys that that benefit.
Yeah, and because the position of Miami-Dade County Mayor really has a platform, right? A bully pulpit, as I would refer to, that goes beyond the four corners of the county. It really allowed me with ease to get involved in issues that were statewide, including issues like closing the gun show loophole in places like Miami-Dade County. The loophole being that you can go to a gun show and buy a gun without showing without the 3-day waiting period or showing your back. Things like that that typically were not within the realm of the day-to-day functions of the county, but had an inordinate impact on metropolitan areas like Miami-Dade County, and universal pre-K was one of them. And I'll never forget this meeting. It was David Lawrence, great, dear friend of mine, former publisher of the Miami Herald, who's still extraordinarily involved on issues of early education, coming into my office one day and saying, with a group of early education advocates. I think this was 98, 99, saying, Mayor, you've got to put together an agenda for children. I go, well, at first I said, talking about things out of your control. I go, wait a minute, David, I got to deal with all these other transportation and homelessness. There's all these, $6 billion budget, all these things that I got to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And he made the case. He said, no, in your county, in the county where you preside, he gave me all the statistics of how, $1 investment in early education saves $7 later on in that child's lifespan. And therein began this effort. And we created I declared 1999 as the year of the child. We had a educational summit at the Miami Beach Convention Center where over 6,000 people came. And the event was co-chaired by myself, David Lawrence, and then Jeb Bush, totally bipartisan. I'm a Democrat. Jeb Bush, very moderate Republican, who I had a great relationship with, and David Lawrence. And from there, we came out with a very clear agenda that was three-pronged. First, we wanted to expand the Kid Care program. This is health care.
Yep.
Benefits for underprivileged children,
Which is an amazing program.
We wanted to have a dedicated funding source for children's programs in Miami-Dade County, which became the Children's Trust. And we wanted to make pre-K a matter of right for all 4-year-olds. So it was a very clear agenda of things. And each one, as you well know, each objective has a certain way of getting done. Some things maybe you have to get done through a constitutional amendment. Others you could go to the legislature and get done. Others maybe you had to take to the voters directly. And therein began our efforts. And we went to Tallahassee, and Kid Care was expanded for underprivileged children. We took to the voters of Miami-Dade County the Children's Trust program, which was approved and then renewed at the height of the recession. And that's been a tremendously successful program. But we also tried to get universal pre-K passed at the state level through the legislature, and they wouldn't budge. I mean, there was a very strong effort by the more conservative element of the legislature at the time, who felt that was going to become another entitlement at the state level, in spite of all the data that we provided. So we went to the legislature on 2 consecutive sessions. We were not successful, and that's when I turned to David and said, you know what, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. We're going to go out and get signatures, and we're going to put this on the ballot. And we did. I created a political action committee. We collected 750,000 signatures in the state of Florida, which you have to do it in different areas of the state, right? You just can't get all the signatures from one part. It has to be divided through different congressional districts and the like. The rules are very complex, and even more so now, by the way. And we put it on the ballot. And I remember at the time there were 3 educational issues on the ballot. You may remember what they were. It was pre-K. It was reform. Then Senator Bob Graham wanted to reform what was called the Board of Regents, which was the group that basically controlled the higher education system. And then Congressman Kendrick Meek had the class size proposal. And I remember meeting with still Governor Bush at the time, and he pulling me aside. We were I think it was a 10-year anniversary event of Hurricane Andrew down in Harris Field in Homestead. And he said, you know what, Mayor? I've got to oppose Board of Regents and class size, and I can't come out for pre-K, but I'm not going to oppose it. And that made a world of difference. Again, showing how bipartisanship works in many different ways. And sometimes just by staying quiet, you're showing that you're willing to work with folks, right? Because they're tugging you in a different direction. So we put it on the ballot, and it passed with 58% of the statewide voters, which ironically would not have passed today. Why? Because a constitutional amendment requires 60%.
Yep.
So you want to talk about timing. And I leave office in 2004. My son Christopher was in pre-K right here at the K through 8. Peggy Mara, the pre-K teacher then, who's still there now. She was the pre-K teacher for our daughter Alexandra many years later. And she was one of the advocates for the program. In 2005, I went back there to announce the beginning of the program. Since 2005, Mayor, over 2 million 4-year-olds in the state of Florida have gone through that program. 2 million 4-year-olds. So yeah, you've got to control what's within your bailiwick, within your, but you also have to know when to push the envelope, right? When you're going to say, well, this is a statewide issue and I'm only the mayor of Dade County, but there was a bully pulpit. There was the ability to raise money. There was ability to get in front of editorial boards throughout the state of Florida. That ability translated then into what I think was really a seminal piece of legislation that's still on the books today. Again, getting back to bipartisanship, this last legislature, to their credit, there's a lot of things I could say that maybe went wrong with this last session. To their credit, they increased the quality standards for the pre-K program, making sure that students are properly assessed, that, the teachers are properly qualified and certified. All that's part of it, because you don't want, we were not proposing a glorified babysitting program. That's not what we were doing was saying that we know that at 4 years of age, that mind is like a sponge, like a sponge. And whatever you throw at them, okay, they're able to. So you ask any of these kids, you probably went to pre-K, right? You're what, 16 or 17 now? If you're in high school right now, you went to pre-K. And all these kids, and
my kids.
Yeah, and it's not coincidence. Well, my daughter was able to, obviously we had Alexandra later in life, but she went through pre. It's not coincidental that if you look at the first class of high school seniors who went through pre-K in that first year, 2005, it was the highest high school graduation rate in the state of Florida.
I believe it. The educational gains since then in Florida have flourished. So kudos to you for getting that done. Those 3 programs, the Universal Pre-K, which is a phenomenal program, Kid Care, and the Children's Trust, the impact that the Children's Trust has had in Dade County. I mean, during COVID, I'll give you an example. There was a major issue. There were first responders. There were a lot of people, essential workers that were going to work. They had nowhere to put their kids. Schools were closed. Children's Trust stepped up. They helped us open Royal Oaks Park. And now all the nurses, doctors, everybody had a place to put their kids in.
Right.
And that is due to the Children's Trust. So, no, those were 3 game-changing programs, not only for the county specifically, like the Children's Trust, but the other 2, the Kid Care. What that's done for families and throughout the state is phenomenal. And that's not even the Universal Pre-K. That's amazing. So great job. And it shows you what happens when people come together. We saw it it rarely happens in Washington. We saw it during the pandemic when they got together to pass the PPP.
Right.
Probably one of the better programs ever. But they're back to obviously.
Yeah,
fighting.
I'm very concerned with that. I'm very concerned. I've never seen us not as a country. I'm not going to talk about as a community, as a country, so divided, so divided, and you've got to either be on one extreme or the other. There's so little room left for moderates, and even local elections have become partisan. Even though they're supposed to be nonpartisan. So you've got to pick and choose, right? And there's no subtleties. You're either all the way over here or all the way over there. And it's a shame. It's a shame, that era of the Bob Grahams, of the Newt Gingriches and the Ronald Reagans.
Tip O'Neill.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're just not we're not seeing. They all say they want to do that, right? But at the voters box, people are choosing repeatedly for the more extreme of options, and it's a shame,
Listen,
because
I got the fix to that. We have to bring back, and I'm with Bob on this, the primary runoffs, right? Where folks, Bob Graham, if it wasn't for that,
yeah.
he would have never been governor, right? So meaning that he never got a plurality in the first and on his first run in the primary. He had to go to a runoff both times
Right.
in the primary. But I think that's, I don't know how you feel about it. Well, that's a discussion for another day. But I think that's something that I agree with Bob in. Hey, nobody should be the nominee of a party with 22% of the vote, right? Statewide, you kind of, there should be more of a plurality, but that's a discussion for
Yeah, there's also the issue of whether non-party registrants, which by the way are the growing segment of registered voters, right? I mean, more people are registering every day as non-party than either Democrat or Republican. Should they be allowed to play a role in the primaries, right? So there's that discussion that could moderate a little bit who ends up winning these primaries. So yeah, there's different things that have been thrown out there as possibility, but yeah, it's a different time.
it
It's
definitely
a different
is.
time.
It definitely is. Lou, I know you got a question. What's up?
I got two questions, and I'm actually going to flip it around so that it can segue better with what you just talked about. You were running things obviously from '96 to 2004. Those 8 years, although other people can serve those 8 years, you couldn't be any different from '96 to '04. Not you, but the world couldn't be any different. You're sandwiched in the middle of a millennium, and it's new technology, this new world that we're talking about, right? So I was actually going to ask this the other way around, but just to segue better, how do you think your run as mayor would have been different with social media? I'm going to ask that one first. And then the second one that I want to ask you is, we all talk about big tech in Miami and this new tech, big tech coming to Miami, all this stuff. You're kind of the grassroots of all this. Again, the millennium brought this new technology. Maybe not what it is today, 20 years later, but what are some of the things that ran through your desk that make you think, oh yeah, here it's coming to life, or maybe already came to life as far as new technology and big technology is concerned?
Two great questions, Lou. Thank you so much. Well, during the late '90s, early 2000s, you could rely on what was referred to as the typical news cycle. Okay, and a news cycle, which we don't talk about anymore now because there is no such thing as a news cycle, was if you had a big thing to announce, or you wanted to announce it on Monday or Tuesday because it'd have legs, right? It'd get reported on the next day, then maybe someone else would cover it on Wednesday, and then an editorial would come out during the week and on the weekend.
Well, the newspaper went out twice a day.
And the newspaper went out twice a day. You could rely on, I don't want to call managing the news because it doesn't sound right, but yeah, you kind of wanted to manage your announcements. When news broke, it broke, and you had to deal with it. There is no such thing as a news cycle now. Okay, there is no such thing as your reliable 3 or 4 media outlets. So those are the two main differences. The news cycle now is every single minute. Every single minute, something is getting posted by somebody, and you just don't know what's going to have legs or doesn't have legs. I'm old-fashioned. I still like to wake up in the morning, turn my coffee pot on, take the alarm off, and go outside and pick up the actual paper version. Yes, that's how outdated I am. Paper version of the Miami Herald. Guess what? I already read everything that's in there.
Online.
I already read it the day before or 2 days before. But it's manía, no, as we call it, of getting up in the morning. That's changed. The news now is happening every moment. So that is a lot different. And how you manage that as the chief executive of a county like this. Regarding big tech, we started to see some of that. Manny Medina, who's made great headlines in this community, started the NAP. When I was mayor in downtown Miami, which he later sold, but that was the beginning of really what was viewed as Miami's transition as as not only a hospitality or agriculturally driven economy or construction. Now there's good and there's bad to it. I think as we grow in the technological sense as a hub here in the greater Miami area, we got to remember that we also need jobs for the folks who are here. for your sons, for my sons and daughter, because a lot of these jobs are being imported in from other parts of the country. The investments are great, but if you're not addressing the issues we have in the inner city, if you're not addressing the issues of gun violence or transportation, the things that are already here, then it may be more of a moment instead of a movement. I mean, and that's a concern. So I think the underlying issues that we have as a community, I think, still need to be addressed. It's exciting though that Miami's being viewed. I give a lot of credit to Mayor Suarez from the city of Miami, how he's branded the city, but there's some folks who live in Little Havana or may live in Hialeah or Miami Lakes who are saying, well, that's great. What does it mean for me? You're living in Liberty City or Miami Gardens, and you're saying, well, there ain't a whole lot of people that look like me part of this effort. So what does it mean for me? I mean, that's a real concern. But it has changed the profile of the city, I think, in a very positive way.
Yeah, you're right. We had Lucy Lopez on here, and we had Ted Lucas, the CEO of Slip and Slide Records, and they both said the exact same thing. He goes, yeah, it's great that people are investing here, but a lot of those jobs are just people moving here. They're still having their workers work remotely from different parts of the country, but how are we going to take care of our people? Because there's still, a brain drain. I mean, we see even a lot of our young folks right here in our podcast, a lot of the folks that produce this leaving to other states, getting educated, and they end up staying over there, where we have to create that ecosystem here in Dade County. So, but part of our podcast, what we do is we flip the script, let you ask a couple questions of me. I know you're a pro at that, 15 years of doing that. So, if you want to take that opportunity now.
Sure. No. And again, Mayor, thank you for this opportunity today, and thank you for your service here, the town of Miami Lakes. Some people may know this already, some may not. I'm actually a resident.
Yep.
Town of Miami Lakes. We built actually a new home here in Loch Lomond. And
did you walk here?
I actually didn't walk here, but I could have.
Yeah,
there's no doubt I could have. There's no doubt about it. We love the lifestyle here. We love the fact that it's funny because the Miami Herald recently did a series on these pockets of Miami-Dade County, and I said, well, why isn't Miami Lakes included there? Because if you really want to point to an original place where you could live, work, play, and go to school, it's Miami Lakes. Because we do all that. There are many days where I don't leave the confines of Miami Lake. So I guess the question to you is, which a lot of Miami Lakers want to know, is how do we protect that lifestyle of being not so quiet of a city like we used to be, because we're growing, but how do we protect that lifestyle in an environment where I'm sure you and your colleagues on the council are being pulled every day for more growth, right? Just right here. I mean, town hall has almost become an afterthought of all the development around all the apartment buildings, and there's talk of the old the Shula's Hotel on off of Main Street being redeveloped. I mean, so how do you manage that and balance all of that?
That's a great question. So Town Center was done very thoughtfully, right? So I know there's been a lot of growth, but there was a lot behind the scenes. We started going to, about 5 years before Town Center got approved, we started going to Orlando, and we started pitching all these businesses, saying, hey, we want you to move your restaurants here, we want you to move different uses here, and we kept getting the same thing. It's like, hey, there's walking distance to your main hub, there isn't enough disposable income, right? There's not enough activity. There's not, just within the center core of our town. When Main Street got built, there was no competition, right? So Main Street got built, there was nothing in Hialeah in terms of entertainment, nothing in Miramar, nothing in Weston, nothing in Doral. So Main Street was a place to be. Fast forward today, Main Street was going down fast. I mean, you had no redevelopment. You had no major dollars going in there. So when we started going to these shows, we realized that. So in conversations with the Grams, we said, hey, we need to spruce this up. We need to bring in a product that is Class A. I mean, this is the nicest apartment product that exists anywhere in Northwest State. I mean, outside of the Gables, there is nothing as nice as this. So what it's done already, right? The proof is in the pudding. We did it. you're seeing major redevelopment in the center core, new restaurants, Ruby Tuesday, which closed down, a brand new restaurants coming in there, spending
Right.
millions of dollars. But how do we, and we're doing that in the center core, but the rest of town, how do we keep the town the way it is? And that's investing and improving our infrastructure. For a long time, for 20, 30 years, we lived off our success in the past. When I got elected in 2012, the entire conversation was like, the 1972 Dolphins lived here. I was like, I wasn't even alive back then. You know what I mean? You got to move forward, and you're seeing that now from this town council. This is probably the most forward-thinking council ever. We just approved a $15 billion bond to fix our stormwater issues. We're getting $13 million from the federal government on the Recovery Act for the same program, and we just got another 400. I just got the text now. The governor's signing his budget. We're getting $440,000 from the state, so we're getting $28.4 million to reinvest into our stormwater system. That is the biggest investment in infrastructure in our community's history. I mean, it's unheard of. So part of doing things like town center, bringing back the main street, which is happening. There's a bunch of stuff happening now. There's going to be a redevelopment of the movie theater, which a lot of people are really excited about. But also preserving what we have is doing that, enhancing our canopy. We just planted 183 trees yesterday, preserving the 18,000 trees that we have, but more importantly, that infrastructure, just little things like that. But we're investing now to make sure that future generations aren't in the same hole as us. But I personally think the proof is in the pudding. Lowest crime rate in town history, highest property values in town history. But we have to preserve that feeling, which is what we're doing. We're taking care of our lakes. We're doing little things that didn't happen before. So that's part of maintaining our community, having townwide bike lanes, simple things as that. I mean, we're going to put, for the first time ever, protected bike lanes on 87th Avenue. I mean, that's unheard of in the town. Those types of investments before, people would say, no, it's a waste of money. Where now the thought is, no, that adds incredible value to the town.
So, obviously you get bombarded every day with questions about blasting and transportation. So I'm not going to go there. But, one of the assets of the town, which I think could be a jewel, is the Optimist Park. And, we've talked about this before. I mean, when my boys were growing up, I was there every night. I coached there for 7 or 8 years. When they were growing up, I coached soccer, basketball, and baseball there, all the way from Pee-wee T-ball to the RBIs when they were 15, 16. But Mayor, as you know, and we've had this discussion, I mean, the Miami Lakes Optimist Park looks like, subpar, to be kind, compared to some of the parks. When you do travel baseball and you go up to South Broward and other parts of town, really nice planned out parks. And I know the clubhouse was recently rebuilt. Great. That was in the works for a long time. But the fields, the actual area where kids play and the concessions, what's the latest on that?
So good news. It looks like the school district finally approved the final design. I think it's going to get presented to the council at the next council meeting. You're starting to see tennis courts for the first time ever. The city council, I mean, and it goes back to being the most forward-thinking council we have. For the first time ever, invested into the tennis. We're going to redo the tennis courts, do pickleball, do all this stuff. But now fixing the fields, because this is the only major community, a premier community in South Florida, that it rains, you can't use those fields. I mean, you have porta potties at those. I mean, to me, that's ridiculous. It's almost shameful, right? I mean, I coach flag football and I coach basketball. So flag football, we're out there. One of my kids needs to use the restroom. They got to run they're gone for half the practice because they got to run all. So it looks like this Tuesday, the city council is going to have an opportunity to move forward on the plan. The school district, it's taken them 3 years to approve the final concept design. It looks like they just did it, so we're going to get it presented. It looks like, based on conversations and strategic planning and on the councils, looks like this will be on the agenda for people to vote on. But you're absolutely right. The dugouts, I'll give you a perfect example. We moved forward on restructuring our dugouts. It got to the point that it was so bad that one weekend, some angels out there went out there and just fixed the dugouts themselves, just put new plywood. Just plywood. I mean, that is not Miami Lake standard.
No.
So it looks like for the first time in town history that it's getting approved. The plan. Hopefully everything's good on Tuesday, and we're gonna move forward. And I hope to see this on the ballot soon because we can't wait any longer. I mean,
So it's on the ballot because it will require a bond issue of some sort, or
more than likely because of the expense. I think it's going to be pretty expensive. There's different things that are part of it. More importantly, is the whole reconfiguration of the fields, putting that concession in the middle, putting in the new soccer and flag football fields, putting in a walking path right inside of the park. All that exists right now is an outside walking path with one on the north side, putting in new drainage, which I'm telling you, this is the only premier community in South Florida that their fields, you can't use them for almost
Right,
a
no,
week.
listen,
You're the commissioner there. So
I understand the porta potties. We had to pull a lot of strings to get the town to approve those. I'm talking about 10 years ago because of the reason you mentioned. So my last question to you is what do we tell those millennials like my 24-year-old who just graduated from Law? What do we tell them to keep them residing in Miami Lakes and the Miami Lakes area? They all want to go to Brickell. They all want to go, where the action is. What's the pitch?
So believe it or not, and it goes back to town center. It goes back to even projects like Satori. The energy that's brought into our community, a lot of young people are staying here because they're like, wait a second, I can walk to Chelas, which is one of the top beer gardens in South Florida. It's right next to my house. I can go now to La Treya Barbecue. It's the only Texas craft barbecue place. There's going to be another brewery style. So those things are really attracting young people to stay here because not only can they work here, right? Now you have one of the top IT firms, software firms that just moved in right here in town center of the new building that we built. So now you can work here, do all these things, live here. And if you don't, it's pretty expensive to buy a house right now. But if you want to live in Class A Brickell style product, it exists. For the first time, I mean, it's not what we've had here in the town for a long time. It's garden style apartments,
right?
No amenities, no stuff. Now everything that's happening exists. So a lot of young people are staying here. So like I'm sure the moment your son walks the halls of this building or see what, I'm sure he goes to Chelas. I'm sure the attractiveness. Lou just moved into Northwest Dade. He was like, he's from down south. He saw everything that's going on here. He's like, no, I want to live here. I want to be part of this community. So the one unique thing that we have about Miami Lakes that beats any other community, I mean, you name it. There's no community that is that environment that we all kind of know each other. I mean, that is
True.
real. On every city block of this town, and this is a true, I know about 5 or 6 families. You name the block, we'll go walk, and I already know them. And it makes our town so unique. We're always helping each other. We always know each other. So it creates an environment that doesn't exist anywhere else. But now we're getting those amenities that never existed. And I think the Optimus Park is that cherry on top, which once we get that, now we have state-of-the-art facilities. But the amenities that a community needs in its center, the livelihood, it's happening today. The jobs are coming in left and right. People are investing here. There's a warehouse that sold for like $8 million in 2014, just resold for $15 million the other day. They're bringing in, I don't know how many hundreds of technological jobs. So
No, you're right. I think though that the one part that's missing, which is I think a critical factor for that millennial crowd, especially if they're working downtown, is unfortunately Northwest Dade has been the stepchild of this county when it relates to major transportation. Okay, there has not been a major transportation proposal since probably when I proposed the full penny in '99,
Yep.
and we were going to expand the Metro Rail right down the Palmetto. I mean, literally, that was the time when the Palmetto was just beginning its 10-year expansion program, and I proposed literally running trains down the middle median of the
Wow.
Palmetto, literally all the way south and all around the bend. Since then, what have we gotten? We've gotten a couple of express lanes, which raised the ire of many residents in this area. The buses are, bus service, I think, for Northwest Dade is mediocre at best, and I think that's something where all of the elected officials from this area, at all different levels, really need to start pushing for Northwest Dade to get on the map in terms of major transport, because we hear about Brightline going to Aventura, we hear about a train linking the mainland with Miami Beach, We've got the South Dade Busway, whether it's BRT or rail. You got all these great initiatives. We're talking about, there's a talk about rail down 27th Avenue to the stadium.
Yep.
But typically, Northwest Dade is left out of that conversation.
No, I think the opportunities now when you have all these developments west of 75, the American Dream Mall, still moving forward, all these things. So now
That's been quiet, though.
It has.
Been very quiet.
It definitely has. But yeah, there's challenges. Dealing, I mean, the county's obviously changed since you've been there, but dealing with the county to get anything done, for us, I'll give you a perfect example. To wrap traffic signal boxes, just to wrap them. I would have done it the next day. Private sector, I would have done it the next day. It took me 2.5 years to get a permit. For us to put a banner on a thing, to even amend the the People's Transportation Plan, to even amend that with the CITT, it took me like 2 years going to meetings to get the freebie service, to get the on-demand first mile, last mile. We were the ones that did it. I was the one that advocated for that. But even to do that, it took me 2 years.
By the way, that's not what the half penny was meant to do, but I understand. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Northwest Dade was abandoned and really wasn't getting its fair share of those transit dollars. So I don't have a beef with freebie, but that's been part of the problem with how that half penny was spent. It was never meant to be, a first and last mile type of alternative. It was meant to do the mass transit. Again, I think it's a great service. We've used it, but
and I'll tell you the reason that I push for that and we push for it was because I know when you and Raul and everybody had worked campaigning for this, once they gave the money to the cities, the county required us to have a set route. So we had to, and for us, we dealt with the realities. We got the cards that were dealt with, and we had 2 buses on a set route going around town empty, diesel buses that we were required by the CITT to have them empty. That's when I said, hey, there has to be a better way. But you're right. If we were being forced to have a set route, that's when we said there has to be a better way to provide some of these services. But you're right. There's so many projects. We've got some good news recently. It looks like the gas line under the Palmetto is finally going to get moved. Meaning now we're going to have some underpass connectivities and exchange on Texas U-turn on 67. Certain things happening. But you're right on mass transit. Would love to see that connection happen. I think it was Xavier Suarez came to see me one time. And he was like, "We want to do the gondolas like what they have. If Disney World can do it, why don't we do it here in Northwest Dade?" But
that's a different story.
Yeah, no, I know. But I really appreciate that, Alex. Thank you very much. This is our last interview for our first season of 305 Vox Populi.